But if this government would come to the table and try and help to ensure better opportunities in those regards. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
So the member will have a minute and a half the next time as the debate continues for his speech, and 10 minutes for questions and comments. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable député de Manicouagan.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, the Quebec forest, like the forest in eastern Canada, is grappling with an insect that's jeopardizing our industry, the spruce budworm. In 2014, the federal government earmarked $18 million over 4 years to fight the spruce budworm, $12 million for New Brunswick and $6 million for Quebec. Half. In addition to being inadequate, it's unfair. There's more forest infected in Quebec than there are forests, period, in New Brunswick. And the zone in Quebec spreads by 1 million hectares per year. When we compare with the West, the government, we can see it's even worse. The government granted $225 million to BC when it faced a similar infestation. That's what the federal government is like in the regions. Out of sight, out of mind, and forget about the checkbook. The forest represents 60,000 workers in Quebec. The Bloc Québécois will not abandon them.
Honourable member from Yukon.
The lifeblood, the spiritual survival, the culture, the food, the clothes of the Gwich'in people of Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska have for eons been integrally connected to the porcupine caribou herd. It is their soul. The herd migrates annually between Canada and the United States, who jointly manage it. Interrupting the most sensitive stage of the life cycle of these caribou, their calving on the 1002 lands of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR, could lead to their extinction and the end of a way of life of the Gwich'in people. This herd could be devastated to extinction by potential oil and gas drilling in ANWR now being discussed in the United States. I therefore call on all parliamentarians, and indeed all Canadians, to do whatever they can to preserve this iconic Canadian heritage and treasure and the lifeline at the heart of the Gwich'in people. Merci, Masicho, Guinness Cheese.
The Honourable Member for Barrie, Springwater, Medonte.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier this fall, Fort Willow was recognized as a National Historic Site. Fort Willow is a vital link in the supply chain connecting Lake Ontario with the Upper Great Lakes. Since the conclusion of the War of 1812, the fort had fallen into severe disrepair and was threatened with being completely forgotten. That was until 1996, a group of volunteers came together to rebuild and preserve the historic landmark. The Friends of Fort Willow have since done a fantastic job of creating a highly educational and great cultural attraction. On behalf of the people of Barrie, Springwater, Medonte, I would like to congratulate the Friends of Fort Willow on a job well done. As well, I would like to pay my respects to the men and women of the War of 1812 who made our country, the true North, strong and free.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Cloverdale, Langley City.
Madam Speaker, on Monday, my community of Cloverdale, Langley City lost a remarkable man. John Urani was born in Kenya before settling in Zaire. In 1974, John was forced to flee his adoptive country when the Zairean government nationalized his entire life savings. A skilled businessman, John moved to Canada and quickly found success operating several prominent local businesses. In 2001, he became the first person of Islamic faith to be elected to the British Columbia Legislative Assembly, holding office from 2001 to 2009. For me, John was not just an admired figure, but a friend and a mentor who was always a source of valuable wisdom, advice, and fortitude. The sadness felt by John's loss will be felt by many people over many parts of the country. And to his family, Gulshan, Nick, Asim, and Nasim, I need not tell you that your husband, your father, was an incredible man, but please know how much he will be missed by myself and everyone who knew him. Thank you, John, for your service, guidance, and friendship. You will be missed.
The Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my profound disappointment with the Liberal government's unwillingness to fix its CPP enhancement legislation, C-26, so that Canadians are not punished for being on a CPP disability pension or for taking time off to raise a child. For reasons that are not entirely clear, so-called dropout provisions haven't been included in C-26. NDP amendments to fix this oversight were rejected by the government yesterday. These dropout provisions have been part of CPP since 1976. Essentially, the government is stacking on a layer or tranche to expand benefits, and women and people living with disabilities are going to be penalized because this new tranche won't have the same dropout provisions of the existing one. These provisions have been excluded from the legislation, but we mustn't give up on other measures in the very near future to fix this injustice. The minister must commit today to undertake due diligence and consult with each
The
province
honourable
and
member for
territory.
Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, on Remembrance Day, I attended a memorial service in my riding in honour of Private Nathan Lloyd Smith, who died in service to Canada on April 17, 2002 in Kandahar, Afghanistan at a young age of 26. Private Smith graduated from Eastern Shore District High School and later with honours from Seneca College. He enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces in 1998 and was assigned to the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry 3rd Battalion. Il a gradué premier.
He graduated at the top of his class from the battle school in Wainwright, Alberta, and received a prize for camaraderie from the Royal Canadian Legion at the end of his basic training. It was an honor for me to have met his parents, Lloyd and Charlotte Lynn Smith, to thank them for their son's service and sacrifice, lest we forget.
The honourable member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister decided to exclude the F-35 from an open and fair competition, workers in Canada's aerospace industry were rightly alarmed. The Liberals' uninformed decision to sole source the obsolete Super Hornet has thrown the industry into a world of uncertainty. And there's no region more concerned than my province of Manitoba. The Prime Minister's politically driven decision has put thousands of high-skilled Canadian jobs at risk. There are more than 70 companies in Canada that are benefiting from over $1 billion worth in contracts through the Joint Strike Fighter program, and all are now in jeopardy. Magellan Aerospace in Winnipeg has said that future work will become uncertain due to the Prime Minister's election promise. What's worse is that the Liberals did not properly consult. Manitoba Premier Brian Palliser raised concerns on the impact of the federal announcement on our province's aerospace industry and criticized the lack of dialogue with local industry on the decision to sole source the Super Hornet. On this side of the House, we are fighting for good-paying aerospace jobs in Winnipeg and right across Canada. Why are the Liberal MPs in Winnipeg so conspicuously silent?
The honourable member for Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, there are people that come into your life that are inherently good, people that radiate kindness, warmth, and love. Doris Mitten was one of those people, and I'm profoundly sad that we lost her this week. Doris filled every room she walked into with a smile and an energy that made everyone feel that anything was possible. She was always optimistic and committed to making a difference in whatever way she could. She and I shared a passion for the work of the Canadian Cancer Society and worked side by side to deliver a Relay for Life experience for the people of Sussex that was both meaningful and hopeful. Sadly, being passionate about the cause did not grant Doris immunity from this devastating disease. Today, I honor Doris and I send heartfelt condolences to her husband Travis, her children, grandchildren, and her extended family and friends. Goodbye, Doris, and may we all aspire to be a bright light like you.
Honourable member for Steveston, Richmond East.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to pay tribute to the Gulf of Georgia Cannery National Historic Site. Built in 1894 and located in the fishing village of Steveston, the cannery was part of the largest commercial fishing port in Canada. It is now a museum presenting the history of Canada's West Coast fishing industry.
This cannery tells the history of Richmond and is an important aspect of the culture and economic heritage in our region. The cannery is also part of Richmond's future, and in fact, tourists and residents alike discover that the historical accounts are similar to what they're experiencing here today.
Thank the Gulf of Georgia Cannery Society for their dedication and hard work in preserving our fishing history.
The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to be working with ranchers from central Alberta who have come to Parliament with the Canadian beef producers to make this government aware of measures required to deal with the detection of bovine tuberculosis in some herds and the quarantine of these animals.
They testified before the Agriculture Committee, and I am pleased to be one of the members of Parliament that wrote the Agriculture Minister spelling out what was needed. Lives and livelihoods are being destroyed at the slow pace of testing as that testing proceeds. They need funding to cover the additional feed costs caused by the CFIA's mandatory quarantine. They need the CFIA to consider local veterinarians to speed up testing. They need to feed their calves that should already have been sold so they can pay their bills. The 34 families in the ranching businesses affected by this situation appreciate the actions to assure compensation for animals that must be destroyed. I hope that the minister takes their request seriously so that ranchers and producers...
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week, Mr. Charles Chuck Steele of the city of Port Colborne passed away at the age of 99. Loving husband of Gladys for 72 years, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather of 14. Born in the family cottage in Waynfleet, Ontario, on September 25, 1917, Mr. Steele lived in South Niagara his entire life. Mr. Steele joined the RCAF in 1940 and flew several Spitfire missions over Europe during the Second World War as part of the 411 Squadron. After the war, he took over his uncle's business and started C&M Steele Insurance Agency, Limited in the city of Port Colborne. His love of horses, which had him traveling across the province of Ontario, was only matched by his commitment to our community, not only here in the southern part of the region, but as well throughout the entire region of Niagara. He volunteered in several local organizations. Chuck Steele was always giving to his community, helping to make it a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you, Chuck, for the legacy you have left behind through members of your family and your everlasting contributions to our community.
The honourable member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, today is the 30th anniversary of the foundation commonly called CAME, which stands for the Centre d'Activité pour le Maintien de l'Équilibre Émotionnel, an activity center for maintaining emotional balance. Created in 1986 by and for people living with a mental illness, this group offers members a place to overcome their fears and suffering and to equip themselves with the means they need, the tools they need to take power over their lives. 30 years later, CAME continues to fight poverty and prejudice, to break isolation, and to offer men and women suffering from mental illness a better quality of life. Congratulations to the leaders and volunteers. Long live the Centre d'Activité in Montreal North for helping maintain emotional balance. Thank you.
The member for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, as a member of Parliament for Dauphin, Swan River, Neepawa, where Ukrainian heritage runs deep, I rise today to remember the Holodomor, where millions of Ukrainians died from starvation during 1932 and 33 under the brutal rule of Joseph Stalin. Stalin and the Soviet Union were committed to curtailing Ukraine's autonomy by launching an onslaught of intimidation, arrest, imprisonment, and the execution of thousands of Ukrainian intellectuals and political and church leaders. Farmers and townspeople were deliberately starved. Crops and seeds were stolen. They were left in isolated confinement with no food to endure a harsh winter, and it is estimated that between 4 and 6 million Ukrainians perished as a result. 2016 marks the 125th anniversary of a Ukrainian settlement in Canada, and we are proud to have been the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence in 1991, when the country ended a long period of totalitarian oppression. On Saturday, November 26th, let us all commemorate the solemn anniversary of the Holodomor and ensure never again.
The honourable member for Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. This International Day was designated by the UN General Assembly in 1999 to raise awareness of the violence faced by women all around the world. The date also marks the start of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence that ends on International Human Rights Day on December 10th. Mr. Speaker, violence against women is a violation of human rights. It is a reality that we must address each and every single day. Gender-based violence grows out of a culture that devalues women and femininity through sexist jokes, derogatory language, and media messages that objectify women. It affects all of us by destroying families, weakening the fabric of our society, and hurting our communities and the economy. Gender-based violence exists because sexism and misogyny continue to be prevalent in our society.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, normally... Mr. Speaker, normally I'm careful and I refuse to get caught up in the magic or craziness of the holiday season before December 1st, but I can't miss this opportunity to thank the hundreds of volunteers who are going to be getting ready this weekend and to carry out the 5th edition of the Grand Fête des Jouets, the 7th food drive for the Pediatric Center, the 11th gift wrapping campaign to fight multiple sclerosis, the 16th food drive for the media, and the 34th Operation Red Nose, without, of course, forgetting the 58th telethon for Noël des Pauvres. To thank them for their efforts, I invite everyone to join the ranks of people who give generously time and money out of the goodness of their hearts. I also hope that the spirit of solidarity that brings us closer together will continue throughout the year to help us build together a fair and more equitable society.
Honourable Member for Abbotsford.
On November 1st, Abbotsford lost a precious teenage life to a senseless act of violence. Our entire community is grieving the loss of Letitia Reimer. Letitia was a phenomenal person, and we just love her, said Mike Olenek, student ministries pastor at South Abbotsford Church. Mike went on to say, "We miss her, and she will forever be in our hearts because of how she connected each of us to her and to each other," end quote. The outpouring of love and compassion has been overwhelming. A community campaign called Abby Strong is now raising funds for the families of Letitia and her 14-year-old best friend, who was also badly injured. The words Abby Strong have been emblazoned on shirts bearing the colors of Abbotsford Senior Secondary School. I encourage Canadians to visit the Abby Strong Facebook page to see how they too can support these two broken-hearted families. On behalf of all of us in this House, we send our love and prayers to the families and friends of these two girls. We are and forever will be Abby Strong.
The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Charles-Lemoine. Mr. Speaker, as a member for Longueuil-Charles-Lemoine, I rise today to highlight the 40th anniversary of the Association des Parents et des Handicapés de la Rive-Sud Métropolitaine, which took place on November 12th in my riding at a magnificent evening event I participated in. I want to congratulate the board, the management team, and above all, the precious volunteers for their commitment on a daily basis over the past 40 years. They have provided invaluable support and respite and have been able to help 250 families this year. Without their braveness and courage, the association would have never come to be. And I want to thank them for their admirable work. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, there are so many important files to be dealt with, and yet the Prime Minister doesn't seem too interested in them. But when it comes time to meeting with Chinese billionaires, well, that's the priority. And when it's time to get money for the Liberal Party or the Trudeau Foundation, that's the priority. Will this Prime Minister finally respect the ethics rules that he himself put in place a year ago? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, my colleague across the way knows very well that we respect at all times the rules that our government put in place and that the Elections Act imposes on all political parties when it comes to financing. And my colleague knows very well that our government is very focused on helping the middle class and growing the Canadian economy. That remains the priority of this government, and we are proud of our record. The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Jean. Well, when it comes to political fundraising, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's rules seem to be very elastic. Mr. Speaker, we know the answer we're going to get from the Prime Minister, that he's respecting rules, but when the Minister of Justice meets lawyers who might ask to become judges, well, and the list is very long, similar examples, we know that there are definitely some ethical questions to be asked here. Mr. Speaker, do you have to give a lot of money to the Liberal Party to be heard by them? Is that what the forestry industry has to do? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, my colleague across the way knows very well that our Minister of International Trade and our government are very concerned by the situation facing the forestry sector and workers across Canada in this important industry. And my colleague knows very well, Mr. Speaker, that we are still committed to finding solutions to support this very important industry for all the regions of Canada, including the region represented by my colleague from across the way. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean.
This Prime Minister has forgotten about the important files that matters to Canadians, like creating jobs and important agreements. He only has time for cash for access meetings and fundraising for the Liberal Party and the Trudeau Foundation. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister follow the ethical rules he personally put in place a year ago?
Well, Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, as I said a moment ago, and my colleague knows this very well, Canada has, according to the Chief Electoral Officer himself, some of the most robust and important political fundraising rules in the world. Mr. Speaker, our party has always followed those rules. Every member of the Cabinet, every member of Parliament from our caucus follows those rules at all times. We're proud to do so. And when the rules are followed, Mr. Speaker, I hate to tell my friend across the aisle, there can be no conflict of interest.
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, selling access and influence to billionaires from China is giving Canadians a clearer picture of who the Prime Minister really is. Now, we know that the Prime Minister has always admired China's dictatorship, but to conduct government business at a Liberal fundraiser with billionaires who are also members of the Chinese Communist Party is shocking. When will the Prime Minister admit that he was wrong and put an end to these obvious abuses of the public trust?
Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, our colleague knows very well that at events like this, government business is not discussed. Our colleague, Mr. Speaker, also knows very well that all members of the House of Commons, including ministers in her former government, attended fundraising events very similar to this one. So she shouldn't be shocked. She shouldn't be shocked, Mr. Speaker, when in a minute I'm going to get up and read her a list of her former colleagues who attended events exactly like this one.
Order. I appreciate the
efforts of the Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Ile d'Orléans, to correct her colleagues. But don't worry.
Mr. Speaker, I can guarantee you we did no fundraisers with Chinese communists. And Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister himself said that they were conducting government business at these fundraisers. He said it just 2 days ago. And in fact, he defended the Liberal Cash for Access fundraisers as a means to conduct this government business. It's a shocking admission, and I'm not surprised that the Fisheries Minister is surprised himself that the Prime Minister said that, but he did. So can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians how soliciting donations from these individuals while at the same time conducting government business is in any way ethical?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Mr. Speaker, the Opposition House Leader knows very well that only Canadians can make donations to Canadian political parties. And Mr. Speaker, I would assume those are the kind of Canadians that attended a $500 a ticket fundraising event with Joe Oliver on May 19, 2015, or maybe the $500 a ticket fundraiser with Jason Kenney on January 30th, 2015, or maybe the $1,500 a ticket fundraiser with former Immigration Minister Chris Alexander at a private home in Toronto. Those are the kind of events that she's familiar with.
Order. The Honourable Member for Outremont. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has himself participated in about 20 fundraising activities with privileged access for the rich. He's also participated in at least 3 activities organized by the Liberal group Canada 2020, which is not obliged to reveal who makes donations to meet the Prime Minister. Canada 2020 is suddenly concerned about the possibility of scandal. Why is the Liberal government continuing to deny that there's a problem when Liberal groups like Canada 2020 understand perfectly that there's a problem? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Once again, Mr. Speaker, my colleague from Outremont knows very well that at all times we respect the rules and the law when it comes to political fundraising. He knows very well, for example, that he himself, having held an event on April 8th, 2016 at $300 a plate in Edmonton, that this kind of practice is something done by every political parties. And Mr. Speaker, we continue to respect the rules. Order. The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Access for cash has to do with the Ministry of Fisheries. Of course, it is a little bit fishy. If only the government had some sort of guidelines about these events, Mr. Speaker. Oh, wait, quote, there should be no preferential access to government or the appearance of preferential access accorded to individuals because they have made financial contributions to political parties. Can the Liberals please try to explain how their cash for access fundraisers do not break their own Liberal rules? They're the government.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we know very well we're the government, and the member from Outremont, I think, knows that as well. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, he's wondering why the Fisheries Minister is getting up. He's continually, Mr. Speaker, on a fishing trip to find perceived and imagined wrongdoing where none exists. He knows that very well, Mr. Speaker. We're proud to follow all of the fundraising rules, just as he did when he went to Edmonton at $300 a person.
Honourable Member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, today the Liberals shut down an attempt to bring Liberal fundraisers to appear before committee. It's almost as if they had something to hide. And yesterday they shut down an entire committee when we proposed that the Liberal CPP legislation be fixed so that it no longer penalizes women. These sunny days are indeed getting shorter and shorter, Mr. Speaker. Can the Finance Minister explain how he allowed this CPP bill to be drafted without the standard protections for women, and why he continues to refuse every attempt to fix it?
Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, our government, the Finance Minister, achieved a historic agreement with the provinces and territories to expand the Canada Pension Plan. That is going to make a significant and positive difference in the lives of Canadians in terms of a secure, dignified retirement. We're aware that more could be done in respect to the dropout provisions for disability and child rearing. And in fact, the Minister of Finance will raise these provisions at the next meeting of the provincial and territorial finance ministers in December in the context of a triennial review of the CPP.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
It's the province's fault that they left women out. That's right.
Now let's talk for a second about Pierre Trudeau, and no, not about the foundation this time. In 1977, it was clear that parents who chose to stay at home to raise their children were penalized by the Canada Pension Plan Act. So what happened? Well, 40 years ago, his government fixed the plan. And now, today, we're having the same debate, but this Liberal government refuses to protect women. So here's my question for the government. What would Pierre Trudeau think of this? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Minister of Finance is actually raising this issue with provincial and territorial finance ministers when they meet in December to address this issue. But beyond that, our government introduced the Canada Child Benefit, which will raise over 300,000 Canadian children out of poverty, which will mean that for a single parent making $30,000 per year, that they will receive $6,000 more per year tax-free from the Government of Canada. That's because we're doing more for the families who need it. And why did the NDP vote against those provisions?
The Honourable Member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Mr. Speaker, today we learned that Canada 2020 has put in place rules to govern fundraising activities with the Prime Minister or Liberal ministers. So they've recognized that there's a serious problem. Since even Canada 2020 recognizes that there's a major problem, how is it that this government across the way is not able itself to recognize that there's a real problem here and that it's breaking ethical rules put in place by the Prime Minister? The Honourable Minister of Fisheries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague should know, and I believe that she knows very well, that we follow all the rules when it comes to fundraising, that we follow all the rules in place, the rules that we ourselves made stricter when we follow those rules, as we do all the time, and because all informations by our political movement are made public, when that's done, there can't be any conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, we can feel that the Liberal government is panicking over there. Once again, they've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar. It's in their DNA, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister breaks his own ethical rules, well, it's an open bar for everyone. This time, it's Canada 2020, which is very close to the Liberals, which feels that it needs to put in place rules to control access to ministers and the Prime Minister. Where there's smoke, there's fire, Mr. Speaker. When will the Prime Minister himself end this privileged access for Liberal donors to members of his government? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, yesterday the member from Red Deer Lacombe made some allegations in here, false allegations. He stated that you can't find an instance where the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, or anybody in the former cabinet had these so-called cash for access. Then, Mr. Speaker, what actually has happened? May 19, there was one. January 30, there was one. May 6, there was one. My question, I should say, Mr. Speaker, if I could ask the question is, would the member, in essence, like to retract, or would the Conservative Party acknowledge that what we are doing is no different than what they did, Mr. Speaker?
The member for Sarnia-Lambton, order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Liberals confirmed what we've been saying for weeks, that the Prime Minister's open and accountable government rules are merely a prop. These rules state there should be no appearance of preferential access in exchange for political donations. After breaking these rules for months, I guess the Liberals had no choice but to admit they were merely a prop. Mr. Speaker, how can Canadians have any faith in the Prime Minister's integrity when he clearly has no respect for his own rules?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is very clear that Canada has some of the strictest rules in the country in regards to the financing. And if you are not breaking the rules or the laws, Mr. Speaker, there is no conflict of interest. I indicated very clearly that under the Conservative government, they had the very same type of fundraising events that we're seeing today, Mr. Speaker, and cited 3 of them, for instance, Mr. Speaker. So I would suggest to you that, in fact, that there is no conflict of interest here.
Sarnia-Lambton, order.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when the Shenglin president pays $1,500 for access to the Prime Minister and then gets his new bank approved, that's what we call preferential access and conflict of interest. And when a Chinese billionaire attends a cash for access event with the Prime Minister, donates $1 million, and $50,000 of it goes to erect a statue of the Prime Minister's dad, Canadians know this is a conflict of interest, especially when the wealthy Chinese billionaire is a political advisor to the communist government in Beijing, the same government the Liberals want to trade deal with. Does the Prime Minister actually believe any Canadians are buying this nonsensical excuse?
Honourable Minister of order. It's not Wednesday. Order. Order. Member Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries has the floor. We need to hear the answer.
Mr. Speaker, the manufactured indignation doesn't change the facts. My colleague referred to the bank approval. She knows very well that that bank approval was given in July 2015 by her former colleague, the then Finance Minister, Joe Oliver. And Mr. Speaker, they keep talking about a donation to an independent foundation that does great work for Canada. Mr. Speaker, the Trudeau Foundation has confirmed that particular donation, the conversations and the discussions began in 2014 with respect to that donation.
I think I've heard the member for Cypress Hills Grasslands 8 times today, and he hasn't had the floor. So let's listen to the member, the honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Why don't we just give it? Mr. Speaker, the ethical walls are crashing down on this Prime Minister. We learned today that the Liberal think tank Canada 2020 is running away from this Liberal fundraising quagmire to protect their own integrity. The Ethics Commissioner has called these Liberal fundraisers unsavory, and the Lobbying Commissioner is undertaking an investigation. Why is it that everyone except the Prime Minister can see that these cash for access events are unethical?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm somewhat surprised. I thought maybe the member would apologize for misleading the House yesterday when he tried to give a false impression. Let me suggest to the member that he needs to recognize, and what he should have said, Mr. Speaker, is that, in fact, on May the 19th, 2015, there was a $500 per ticket to attend a fundraiser with the Finance Minister at the time, Joe Oliver. On January the 30th, 2015, there was another $500 dinner sponsored by the Employment and Social Development Minister, Jason Kenney, Mr. Speaker. So there is more to it, and I was expecting the member to actually apologize for misleading the House yesterday.
Order, order. Let's be careful how we characterize the actions for the members. The member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wondered what kind of defense they would try and chuck across the floor today. It's obviously a lot different than the one they tried yesterday. Now, Mr. Speaker, Canada 2020 gets it. The Lobbying Commissioner gets it. The Ethics Commissioner gets it. The former Liberal Deputy Prime Minister, Sheila Copps, gets it. I watched Peter Mansbridge last night. I think he got it. Wow. Good God. Even the Toronto Star gets it. They all understand that these Liberal cash for access events are unethical. When will the Prime Minister put a stop to these cash for access events?
Honourable. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have said on many occasions that at the end of the day, we look at our laws and rules, and we as a party have followed those laws and rules. Nothing has been broken here, and if you don't break the laws, Mr. Speaker, there is no conflict of interest. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I would refer, whether it's the New Democrats or the Conservatives, where they have had to pay back monies, Mr. Speaker. There have been no laws that have been broken here, so there are no conflicts of interest to be challenged on this issue, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata, Les Basques.
Defense is that they are as bad as the Conservatives were.
In a fit of honesty, the Minister of Finance admitted that small municipalities won't really be helped by the infrastructure bank. He said that private investors who are looking to invest want to see big transformational projects that will lead to high returns. Michael Sabia mentioned returns of 7 to 9%. So they won't be really interested in good bridges or roads if they don't get a good return. So why are $15 billion that could have helped cities like Rimouski or Jonquière being used just for custom-made projects for Toronto and Montreal?
Honourable Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, we understand that infrastructure is the foundation for building strong and sustainable communities of all sizes, including rural communities and small communities. So let me share some information with you, Mr. Speaker. Out of more than 980 projects that we approved so far, more than 600 of those projects are in communities with a population of less than 100,000 people. We are helping all communities to build the necessary infrastructure they need because we understand we need to grow the economy across the nation. Thank you.
Member for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, every day it becomes clear the Liberals have been dishonest about their infrastructure bank. When asked repeatedly if people should expect to pay more to use this infrastructure, the Finance Minister deflects and obfuscates. The Liberals never mentioned they would use public infrastructure to pass revenue to the private sector through user fees and tolls. Why are they doing this now, and why did they mislead Canadians during the campaign?
Mr. Speaker, we were elected on a platform to invest, do an historic investment in infrastructure, including including the creation of the infrastructure bank. The role of the bank is to build more infrastructure for Canadian communities. And we will do that by providing low-cost loans, loan guarantees, as well as taking equity stake in projects that otherwise would not have happened. Our role is to grow the economy, create jobs for Canadians, and make sure that all communities are prospering. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and Kathleen Wynne are at it again. Canadians paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for Wynne's high-level staff to move to Ottawa to run the PMO. What do we get for that? The same disastrous Ontario Green Energy Plan that's now being pushed onto all Canadians. And now we learn that the federal Liberals paid over $23,000 for public relations services for Kathleen Wynne's recent trip to Israel. Wow. Mr. Speaker, all of us know that Ontario is broke, but why are Canadian taxpayers paying for Kathleen Wynne's public relations bills?
Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, on an ongoing basis, our government consults with and engages Canadians.
The honourable member for order. I know, order. I know how much members appreciate brief answers. But let's listen now to the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Swallowing his words. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I should have let the member finish his lunch before I asked the question. Mr. Speaker, the connections between Kathleen Wynne, the Prime Minister, Gerald Butts, and Katie Telford are alive and well. As ridiculous as this sounds, Kathleen Wynne asked her operatives in the Prime Minister's office to pay for preparation, implementation, and monitoring of a recent trip to Israel. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? Butts, Telford, and the Prime Minister said sure to the tune of $23,000. We all know again that Ontario is broke, Mr. Speaker, but why are the federal Liberals using federal cash to pay for their friend Kathleen Wynne's public relations bills?
And like.
Order.
I trust that the Honourable President of the Treasury Board was simply ruminating on the question that was posed, and he knows we aren't allowed to eat in the House. The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it's just that my colleague have the wrong information. The amount of money that he speaks about is an amount of money that was available for anyone. It was for offering services to anyone. It happens that we are very pleased that the Premier of Ontario went in Israel. She did a great job there, and she had the services of the embassy, as everyone is welcome. If my colleague wants to go, he will have the same service.
The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals really have lost touch completely with Canadians. They're wasting money left, right, and centre. Limos, moving expenses, cash payments to staff, and the Prime Minister's ongoing international junkets. They are increasing taxes on hard-working Canadians with payroll tax increases, a carbon tax, a small business tax increase. Canadian families are struggling, and the Prime Minister is spending all of his time with billionaires and celebrities. When will the Prime Minister start hearing the pleas of regular Canadians and stop making their hard situations worse?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, our Prime Minister has been very focused on the economy and creating jobs. That is why we're very proud to work with Bell Helicopter for the creation of 1,000 jobs. That is why Thomson Reuters has created up to 1,500 jobs under the leadership of this Prime Minister. That is why we have 1,000 engineering jobs at GM. But not only that, Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to highlight some other companies as well. Hypertechnology Kiera, we helped with the increased recycling of electronic products. 260 jobs. Studio Animation in Montreal, we helped increase production for animation film. 300 jobs. Optovision, 400.
The honourable member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, Liam saved up the down payment for a home in Strathmore. He was pre-approved for a mortgage in his price range and was just waiting for his lease to expire so that he could move into a new home. Then the Minister of Finance changed the rules. Now Liam can't qualify for anything in Strathmore, Chestermere, or Calgary. The Prime Minister is running a $30 billion deficit, plans to borrow tens of millions more to revamp 24 Sussex. How can the Prime Minister do this while telling Liam that he can't have a mortgage?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Ministry of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what this government is all about and remind my friend on the other side. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what we're doing. We're investing $180 billion over 12 years. That's an historic investment. And let me remind the member what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. $25.3 billion in public transit. We're investing $21.9 billion in green infrastructure for Canadians. We're investing $10.1 billion in transport projects in this country. We're investing $2 billion in rural and northern communities, Mr. Speaker. We're creating Invest in Canada to attract investment. All that, Mr.
Order. I think we all know the members for Brantford-Brant and Variansville can count, but they didn't do it while someone else was answering a question. The Honourable Member for Desneti Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, a senior official at Health Canada admitted at committee that they have no method for tracking requests, delays or denials when it comes to counselling for First Nations kids. This is a major concern. Last month in my riding alone, there have been several suicide attempts and 6 were successful. What is the government's plan for identifying the needs of Indigenous youth? How can the Health Minister know what is needed without tracking this information?
Minister of Health.
I thank the honourable member for her question, which refers to a discussion that we had at the Indigenous Affairs Committee last week, and we talked about the mechanisms by which the First Nation Inuit Health Branch is responding to the needs of Indigenous Canadians. I am very pleased to say that indeed we are tracking those needs, and in fact I just returned from Manitoba where I was able to ascertain that 1,000 children have now been assessed for the full implementation of Jordan's Principle to make sure that they have access to the care that they need, and people are very pleased that kids are getting the care that they deserve.
Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Last week, the United Nations Committee to Eliminate Discrimination Against Women released its report on Canada. It denounced the closure of 12 of 16 Status of Women regional offices. These conservative cuts limited women's access to services, especially in rural and remote areas. The UN has now asked this government to reopen the regional offices. Does the minister agree with the United Nations? Will she reopen the 12 Status of Women offices to better serve women no matter where they live? Yes or no?
The Status of Women.
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is committed to preventing all forms of gender-based violence. We are working very hard towards this matter. Throughout the summer, we held consultations, and we will continue our good work into preventing such situations. Thank you very much.
For Pickering, Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, our government committed to making it easier for Canadians to vote. Can the Minister of Democratic Institutions update this House on the next steps to ensure our elections are more open and inclusive?
Excellent. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member from Pickering Uxbridge for this very thoughtful question, and I'm pleased that today in this House we introduced Bill C-33. This bill is intended to repeal the unfair elements of the Fair Elections Act. We're going to remove unnecessary barriers for young people, for seniors, for Indigenous persons, for homeless people who don't have access to proper identification, for example. That bill will be debated in this House, Mr. Speaker, and I'm counting on our colleagues in this place to help further strengthen this bill.
Honourable Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Liberals refused to answer how much the obsolete Super Hornet will cost and how many jobs will be lost in Canada's aerospace industry. Former National Defence Procurement Head Dan Ross said this was probably the worst possible option. Taxpayers will bear the cost of this. Experts have unequivocally stated that operating an M-term fleet will significantly increase the Air Force's operational costs. Why are the Liberals wasting tax dollars, breaking the rules, and breaking their promise for a fair and open competition?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, we are investing in the Canadian Armed Forces. We are going to have an open and transparent competition and making sure that any company that meets the requirements will be able to compete. And in the interim, we are going to be filling the capability gap and not risk managing like the previous government. We're also going to be staying in the Joint Strike Fighter program that's going to benefit all Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We're going to be investing into the Canadian Armed Forces and not cutting like the previous government.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the only evidence that the minister is giving to explain our capability gap is that we have a capability gap. I'd like to remind him that repeating a lie doesn't make it true. We don't have a capability gap. The Liberals should launch a bid immediately to replace our CF-18s instead of buying a fleet of 18 Super Hornets that we don't need. How many billions of dollars, 5, 6, 7, are the Liberals going to burn through to purchase a useless piece of equipment?
Mr. Speaker, one, we do have a capability gap, and I have spoken with the member opposite, who was the former the parliamentary secretary of the National Defence, knows the numbers and our operational commitments that we have, that we right now currently cannot meet those commitments simultaneously. And Mr. Speaker, I just don't understand why they're against investing into the Canadian Armed Forces with an interim fleet right now.
Honourable member for Lethbridge.
Thank you. Female survivors of sexual slavery require special care and attention. Even the United Nations is calling upon Canada to ensure that Yazidi women and girls receive this type of care upon arrival. Yesterday, I put forward a motion in the Standing Committee on the Status of Women asking that Canada secure a plan for these young women and girls who are coming into our country in the coming months. Unfortunately, the Liberals were quick to defeat my motion without even so much as a discussion. Wow. Mr. Speaker, why are the Liberals rejecting every single effort put forward to serve these Yazidi women and girls?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Quite the contrary, Mr. Speaker. In fact, all of the Liberals, indeed all members of the House, voted positively for a motion to bring Yazidi and other victims of Daesh here within 120 days. So we all have agreed to that, Mr. Speaker, and my department is working very hard to devise a plan in order to make this happen.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, what the truth is, it's been a month since the Prime Minister stood in this place with his hand over his heart, looked into Nadia Murad's eyes, and committed to action for the Yazidi sex slaves girls.
He did.
And earlier this week, department officials said they were going to bring 50 of them here. 50.
Only
this
50?
is completely unacceptable. This morning, Nadia Murad said Yazidi victims are waiting for serious steps by this government. Commitment to measly numbers is not what we expected our work for. Mr. Speaker, this government brought 25,000 other refugees here. Why can't they do the same thing for genocide victims? This is disgusting.
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, that number is wrong, and the honourable member knows it is wrong because she received a briefing from my department on our plans 2 days ago. So she knows very well that we are working on a plan, and she should know by now that to go public with this in a way that attracts attention will put our plan in jeopardy, make it more difficult for our people to go into that territory, and ultimately make it harder for us to rescue those victims and bring them to Canada.
Member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the U.S. Lumber Manufacturers Association is expected to file a formal complaint against Canadian producers. This will cause a major crisis for the Canadian forestry industry. When the agreement expired, the minister refused to give any assurances, and her government didn't have a fallback plan. A month later, and we still haven't heard her plan. Does the minister not understand that tens of thousands of Canadian jobs are on the line? When will she finally act to protect forestry jobs in Canada?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, it's important to remember that the softwood lumber agreement expired under the previous government's watch. As the Prime Minister said, We look forward to working closely with the new U.S. administration. Negotiations are continuing with the USTR. I met with Mike Froman last weekend in Lima during the APEC summit, and the Prime Minister raised the issue with President Obama. We continue to work in close collaboration with lumber producers, workers, the provinces, and territories. But we're fighting for a good agreement, not just any agreement.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, I'm getting sick of hearing the same record over and over. Tomorrow, the Americans will likely file an official complaint, an official trade complaint for unfair competition against the Canadian lumber industry. Without an agreement with the United States, our exports could be hit hard with stiff duties. The entire Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region will pay for the Liberals' inaction with plant closures, less work for our business owners, fewer jobs, in short, a weaker regional economy. For months now, I've been asking whether the government has a plan B. Does the Minister of International Trade realize how urgent this matter is? What is the government intending to do to support our businesses and our workers? The Honourable Minister of International Trade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For months, we have been involved intensively in negotiations and discussions. The Conseil du Patronat du Québec said that we are defending the Quebec industry, and the Quebec Industry Council has also said that they are pleased with our position on the Quebec forestry system. There's just the opposition that does not recognize the work that we are doing to protect Quebec workers and Canadian workers.
Mr. Speaker, tens of thousands of unemployed energy workers face a bleak Christmas this year thanks to inaction from this Liberal government. Energy East is stalled, Northern Gateway's in limbo, Trans Mountain expansion is delayed. Hard-working middle-class Canadians are tired of the delays, tired of the Liberal red tape, and tired of the silence from this minister. When will this minister actually speak up for the plight of these unemployed workers, and when will he actually do something to help them get back to work?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we haven't been silent. We've been speaking from the moment this government came to power about the importance of developing a credible regulatory process and giving proponents of these projects some certainty. In the case of all of the projects that the honourable member had mentioned, there are deadlines, there are processes, literally tens of thousands of Canadians have offered their point of view, and we are very pleased to listen to all of them.
Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Well, Mr. Speaker, under our government, the Keystone, Alberta Clipper, Anchor Loop, Line 9B, and Northern Gateway pipelines were all approved, and the Northern Gateway pipeline will go to Tidewater if this government doesn't kill it. Jobs will only be created if this government starts to fight for these projects to actually get built. While this minister dithers, unemployed workers worry how they will keep a roof over their heads and food on the table, and First Nations equity partners stand to lose billions. Does this minister have anything to offer these workers other than more empty rhetoric and Liberal inaction?
Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, we could talk about the action of the Conservative government, the Harper government. Let's talk about the number. Let's talk about the number of kilometers of pipeline that were built to oceans during their 10 years. The number is 0. So if the honourable member thinks that it makes good public policy to try to repeat that failure, we think we have a better way. We have offered the people of Canada ample opportunity to offer their views. We have a process. We have certainty of deadlines, a much better process than the one we inherited.
Honourable member for Cypress Hills Grassland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government has failed energy workers. They're failing farmers as well. Too many agricultural decisions are made a long way from the field, and yesterday the Liberals did it again. They announced that neonic chemicals are being removed for pest control. What? These products have been used safely and effectively for years. Inadequate science, no cost analysis, and competitors who have not made this move. Why are the Liberals once again putting our agricultural producers at a disadvantage?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, our government takes matters of health and safety seriously, and Health Canada reviews pesticides on a regular basis. As a part of its review, Health Canada has found that a particular pesticide, imidacloprid, can be found in concentrations up to 290 times the level of acceptable risk. Given this, Health Canada is proposing to phase out agricultural uses of imidacloprid over a period of 3 to 5 years. Health Canada is being sensitive to the needs of the agricultural community while at the same time protecting the environment in proposing this evidence-based decision.
The member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, this summer we mobilized over 35 young volunteers in Richmond Hill in order to recruit stem cell donors for Canadian Blood Services One Match initiative. It became evident to me that stem cell research is breaking ground in cancer research, and Canadians know it. In Budget 2016, our government recognized stem cell as one of key issues our Science Minister must tackle. Can the Minister of Science update the House on her work with regards to this file? Thank you.
Honourable Minister of Science.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is globally recognized as a founder and leader of stem cell research. Regenerative medicine has the power to repair, regenerate, or replace damaged cells, tissues, and organs affected by illness. To further Canada's leadership, today I announced $12 million allocated through Budget 2016 to the Stem Cell Network. Funds will support 31 projects and clinical trials that are developing real-world therapies, products, and treatments regarding regenerative medicine.
That's great news.
The Honourable Member from Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, since the Liberals came to power, Quebec business people and job creators have lost their voice within the federal government because the position of a Minister for Economic Development, who actually hails from Quebec, was eliminated. In line with their power-centralizing tendencies, the Liberals claim that a minister from Toronto who seldom sets foot in Quebec can represent the entire country just fine. When will the government stop ignoring Quebec regions and their residents, not all of whom can afford to contribute $1,500 to the Liberal coffers? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Monsieur le Président, nous avons
Mr. Speaker, we have an excellent team of 40 members across the territory who work for Quebec. Since we were elected, we have approved millions of dollars in grants and contributions. We support over 385 businesses and organizations in business development, and our government has committed to promoting innovation, foster the growth of businesses, and to develop an economy that will benefit everyone. Thank you.
Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' long-term climate strategy submitted to the United Nations claims they will encourage green infrastructure in northern and remote Indigenous communities, while ensuring that any consultations on projects must respect the constitutional, legal, and international obligations to Indigenous peoples. In the wake of federal approvals of the Site C Dam and the major LNG project that encroach on Indigenous rights and territories, is this the depth of commitment we can expect to Indigenous rights from this government?
Here, here, here.
Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member opposite well knows, our government is committed to our obligations under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and rebuilding our relationship with Indigenous peoples. That is why with every project that the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency undergoes a review, we meet with Indigenous groups. We listen to their concerns, we accommodate them. With the Pacific Northwest project, we have the first ever Indigenous Environmental Monitoring Committee with the Indigenous groups that are impacted by the project.
Member for Guelph.
Mr. Speaker, bovine tuberculosis is affecting ranchers in Alberta and Saskatchewan whose herds are under quarantine because of this disease. As a member of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, can the Minister of Agriculture please tell us what he's doing to help these ranchers who have been put under quarantine by the CFIA until testing is complete?
Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question from Guelph and his interest in the issue. Being a farmer, I certainly understand that bovine TB is a serious challenge for these ranchers. I am pleased to confirm that working with the province, we are committed to compensate these ranchers for the costs they are facing, including interest on their advance payment loans. We're working hard to address this unfortunate situation and take measures to help these ranchers with this serious challenge. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Carleton.
The Ottawa Hospital expert panel carefully studied all options for a future site and chose the one right across the street on open federal land, easily accessible by ambulances. Now, the Liberals are forcing the hospital to move to Tunney's pasture, which the expert panel ranked way down at number 6 because of hundreds of millions of dollars in demolition costs and longer travel times for ambulances. Will the hospital have to cut patient care to pay these extra costs? And what will happen to trauma patients whose ambulances are stuck in traffic?
The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The National Capital Commission for their hard work. Last spring, I asked them to go and do a thorough review of potential sites for the Ottawa new civic hospital, and there was a rigorous, open and transparent process. 8,000 people participated in this process, and ultimately the NCC came up with an excellent site, which is Tunney's pasture. I will make sure that the government will study this recommendation, have great discussions with the Ontario government as well, and this is part of our own views of the NCC, having it.
The honourable member for Gaville-Duneau. Mr. Speaker, we now know that the trade war over softwood lumber is about to resume. On Friday morning, the U.S. Lumber Manufacturers Association is slated to file a formal complaint against our forestry producers with the U.S. International Trade Commission. This is a new crisis, Mr. Speaker. Here's a simple question. Will Ottawa once again abandon the Quebec forestry sector and the families whose livelihood depends on it, or will the government provide it with loan guarantees to weather the crisis, as the National Assembly and the producers are calling for? The Honourable Minister of International Trade. Mr. Speaker, the softwood lumber agreement expired under the former government's reign. As the Prime Minister said, we are eager to work very closely with the new administration. I continued negotiations with Michael Froman on the weekend at the APEC summit in Lima, and the Prime Minister also raised it with President Obama. We will continue to cooperate closely with the lumber producers, workers, the provinces and the territories. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. But what we have to repeat, Mr. Speaker, is the forestry means people. It means 120 villages in Quebec. This is how we live on our land. A new lumber crisis will affect people in Quebec, in our villages, who are going to lose their livelihood and who may have to leave their region in order to find new work. Will Ottawa commit, I repeat, will it commit to granting loan guarantees to the forestry sector to weather this new crisis that is caused by the Prime Minister's inability to negotiate in the interests of Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of International Trade. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are working very hard on the softwood lumber file, and we are working for Quebec and for the jobs there. I was very pleased to meet with the lumber workers and producers from Quebec this summer in Saguenay, and I was also pleased to meet with the Montreal business sector in October. I will continue to work closely with the Quebec government to sign or to ratify CETA, a progressive agreement. I'm proud to work side by side with my Quebec counterparts to protect jobs in Quebec.
I would like to draw to the attention of honourable members the presence in the gallery of the Honourable Mark Fury, Minister of Business and Minister of Service, Nova Scotia. And now I understand the honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill is rising on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. During question period today, the Minister of Immigration answered my question about how many Yazidis would come to Canada in the 120-day period. With the, I had brought forward the number that Foreign Affairs official had brought forward at committee as 50. This was on the record. He said that that number was not true and that I had received a briefing which was in camera in committee. So, given that
Order. I'll let you know if I think it's debate. Order. Let me hear the comment, please.
The Minister of Immigration said that the number 50 was not true and made an accusation about me, but yet one of the department officials had said 50 on the record. I would like him to either withdraw his comment about that number not being true or provide the House with the accurate number of how many Yazidis will be coming to Canada.
see the Honourable Minister of Immigration wishes to respond. Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Well, yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I